My name is Robert Aceves, and I'm here with Neil Babins. How you doing, Neil?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here again. One more week, and I love all the comments that people are leaving us. And I've had several messages from people that are listening to this podcast now, and they're following us. Really appreciate your time and following us. This is something we love doing every week, and hopefully we'll continue to do it every week for the next year or so or more. Mm-hmm. So, How was your weekend?
Oh, it was really nice. I was up in the desert, actually, and I saw the Salton Sea for the first time.
Ooh, that's awesome.
It was really awesome. We saw fossils of fish all over the place.
Very cool.
The only drawback was that it smelled like fish. Because originally that land had been covered with water, and then it retracted. So we were sort of walking on the bottom of the sea, for a period of time. But you look around you, it's just otherworldly. It's just amazing. It was like I made a comment. It's just like walking on Mars. Not that I've ever walked on Mars, not yet.
Yeah,
but it looked like another planet. It really did until we saw what looked like a snake, and I took a picture of it. Oh, that's a tire.
Oh, no!
I saw civilization somewhere.
Yeah.
You look down, you see a wrapper of something. I'm like, oh, okay, people have been here. But it just looks on its own like you're just on another planet. It's amazing. Natural beauty, a different kind of a beauty,
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you had fun.
Mm-hmm.
So today we actually have a question from one of the people that listened to our last podcast. And, we last time we talked about, real conversation versus small talk. So like what's real communication? So now someone's asking, like, how do you know when you're really being yourself and, versus when you're putting on a mask? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And, you talk about your core self in the past, Neil, and what is that to you?
Core self to me basically is when you're being 100% mindful, or as close to 100% as you can be, meaning that you're in the here and now, you're present, and that you're not attempting to put on a part of yourself, or not attempting to be something other than what you're truly experiencing in the moment. It means that you're connected to yourself and to other people. It means that you're in a state of calm. Mm-hmm. It means that you're also in a state of, if necessary, of courage and curiosity about people around you, mm-hmm. about yourself as well. And you're in tune. You're in tune with what you're feeling. And you're not trying to cover what you're feeling in order to get to a certain outcome. You're allowing yourself to feel jitters if you're feeling jitters. You're allowing yourself to feel a little awkward if you're feeling awkward. You're allowing yourself to feel, upset if you're feeling upset. You're just being with what is there, and you're not presenting yourself in a different way to someone else. And then that's tough because people say, well, what if I'm giving a presentation and I'm nervous? I can't stand up there and be nervous. Right? That's true. Right? You have to be able to calibrate what part of yourself you're going to bring forth to get the job done. But that's different, because you're being mindful at mm-hmm. the same time as you're bringing in that part of you that you need, as opposed to that part just sort of jumping in and automatically happening because you're trying to get to a certain outcome. You're allowing it to be. You're allowing yourself to be present, and then you're saying, okay, I need my sharp self right now. I need to be focused. I need to teach a class, or I need to go out on a first date, or I need to talk to my boss, or I need to speak to a client. I need to be who I need to be right now. So you bring in that part of yourself that achieves that task, but you do it mindfully. You do it with intent. You do it with structure, mm-hmm. And then when you're done with that part, you set it aside and you're on to your next venture, as opposed to just walking through and pretending that you're one thing, as opposed to allowing yourself to be in the here and now, and then calling forth another part of you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. So my answer to that question is a little bit different. I found that, I believe that when we're born, we're like a blank slate. We were born wherever we were born, but at the same time, depending on what country or what location geographically, we were born in, then at the moment that we're born, we automatically get this stamp of, okay, this is what you're going to be, kind of thing. Like, if you're Mexican, you're going to be Mexican. If you're white, you're going to be white. If you're Asian, you're Asian. Whatever nationality you're in, it's already going to have an effect on your personality and who you're going to be, right? But then if we go further, you see that, as you're growing as a baby, you have your parents that are taking care of you, or, grandparents, or the people around your parents that are, constantly coming over to their house. And so you start seeing people and learning from them, and seeing how they act in the world and how they do things, and you start learning from them by modeling, right? You start modeling their actions and the way they talk. And so by the time we were grown, and we say something, it's not just us saying it, it's our parents and our grandparents and all our family members and ancestors and the people that we've ever known. And so when you're speaking, it's not just you speaking, it's all these different personalities and all those different things from your past that are coming through in the present. So to me, to be really yourself, to really, come to your core self, and that's what I practice with meditation. And what you're saying about mindfulness is very true, is how you can get rid of all those things and all those different personalities and all those different desires from all these people, so you can find the true you, the true self and the person that you are, without all those things from your parents and your family and ancestors and even society, because sometimes we pick up from things from societies, and we, there are certain beliefs that are collective, and like this collective consciousness of like, okay, if you're American, you're going to hate Russians, or if you're Mexican, you're going to want to do this, or if you're from Argentina, you're going to love meat, or different things that you may say they're little stereotypes, but sometimes some of those can be true based on where you're living and what culture or customs you were exposed to. And so all those things are not really you. Those are things you picked up over the years, but the real you, could be different. Like, your name is Neil in this life, but what was the name you had before you were given that name, and that's kind of where I come from with that question. What do you think?
Well, that's profound. Who was I before I was me?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I like that. It's sort of, I use the metaphor of with a lot of clients about they're a block of marble, and they want to chip away at the marble until they get their statue of David.
Right.
Or their chosen statue doesn't have to be David. And what you said is absolutely true. It reminds me of Adler, the famous psychologist Adler.
I love Adler.
Yeah, who says very plainly that you have to decide and figure out what your own values are. And your own values may be very different from your family constellation and your social constellation. And that goes back to the main point that a lot of people automatically behave, you're exactly right, by the way they've modeled it from their communities, from their families, from their feedback, the way that they are, the way they absorb and internalize how to react and behave in everyday life. And then as they start to search themselves and begin to realize, I realize that I'm speaking the way all of my family spoke, or I'm thinking with a thought process is the way my family thought, or whatever it may be. And then they sort of take a step back and they realize, who am I? Do I really believe that? Do I really feel that same way, or was I sort of constructed to believe that way?
Right.
To a certain degree. And it's fascinating when you learn that. It's also a little distressful at first, because you're like, it's everything I've known. And you took for granted those were your values. A lot of people will say to me, I always thought I wanted a wife and kids, or I always thought I wanted to buy the house by the time I was 29. And they'll say, I'm so stressed. I'm 30 and I'm still renting. I'm like, okay, let's peel this back. And they realize, what? They don't have the same values necessarily. They don't have the same desires that they were raised to feel that they needed to possess. So,
right.
Knowing your core self has a lot to do with asking yourself exactly that. Who am I within my community? Who am I within my family? Do I really share the same thought processes and values, or have I been raised to absorb them that way? And
who am I without them? Without my family, without my community, without anybody. Like, if you strip someone from everything, what do you have left? And to really realize it, and like you said, it can be very painful at first, but if we realize, what things are our things and what things are not from our own belief systems, but we pick them up and we believe them in a way, but at the same time we have this other inner core belief that believes completely opposite of that, and then there's a conflict, and then we feel like, oh my gosh, I have feelings for this, but then my community wants me to do this, and that's where people start having a lot of conflict and issues, and that's where we start putting on masks, and we start to pretend that we are something that we're not, and over time that causes disorders and mental disorders and insomnia and all those different things that manifest in our bodies through disease.
Yeah, it causes what we often call dissonance, like
yes.
an intrinsic desire to do something different than what our outer shell is telling us we ought to be doing, and then we're not really listening to some of the realities or our personal subjective realities inside, and we're just suppressing them or avoiding them in order to get to where we think we need to be, or where we have a lot of wounds or a lot of memories or a lot of painful events that happened prior in our lives, and we are putting on masks in order to try to overcome those. So if we always felt inadequate growing up, we felt less than, or we felt insecure, we might go about and say, okay, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to go to school and get my PhD. I'm going to open this business and do really well, whatever it is. We're going to have that family that I never had. I'm going to have those 3 kids. They're all going to be well-dressed and well-behaved and have a good marriage, unlike my parents, and we are trying to sort of do the opposite of what we were raised with. And if we look inside and see who we are and visit our wounds and our emotions, we might discover that all I really want to do is heal my wounds. I don't necessarily have to create a life that's different from the one that I lived, So, it's just interesting because there's so many ways to go about it with that.
And I have to add, when you talk about wounds, I think that sometimes we also pick up wounds from that are not ours, again, from our ancestors and people that we grew up with. And, we have this thing like I don't know how to say it, but let me explain a little bit. Like I have a friend who she's from Armenia, and her whole family's from Armenia, and they constantly talked about the genocide back in the day, and her whole family suffered through that. But she's now 20-something. She's a younger woman, and she's an amazing woman, but she's still carrying that wound from her family from the past that it's not hers. She wasn't even there, but the family was, and they went through it, and she suffers from that wound that wasn't hers. And I'm not saying, to forget about the past, but I think sometimes we do carry wounds that are not ours, and they're affecting our present, and they're not allowing us to be happy. And there are things that, that yes, they are very painful for some of our relatives, but they're not ours. And so by carrying those wounds and things from the past, sometimes we feel like, it's the right thing to do, but at the same time, what if that's taking away from your happiness in the present? And, how can you heal that and know that it's not yours, and maybe, try to do something about it without having that pain or suffering? I don't know if that makes any sense.
It certainly does. We call that transgenerational anxiety or transgenerational wounds, and they happen often, especially in terms, like you said, of genocide and, civil strife like that. It is passed on. A lot of the times, I think what happens is that we sort of, we know of the pain and we know of the history. So for us to take on a certain level of joy, it seems like a disloyalty. When somebody has suffered a lot, even though they say, no, we want you to be happy and don't sweat the little things, because we know what it's like when you what life is really like. But we take on the burden, really, of trying to be happy within the confines of what could happen, and like what happened in our families from past anxieties. I think sometimes people hold back for that reason, hold back joy, because it seems, like I said, like a disloyalty.
Right. Yeah.
Or we see the pain in the eyes or the energies of our family and coming down from generation to generation, and that makes us feel sad. And we don't even have an outlet to deal with that sadness because we weren't there, and there's nothing we can do about it. Right. Completely beyond our control. So we absorb that sadness as our own. And then we grow up and we still have that sadness there. And we're really not sad about the event. We're sad about feeling other people's sadness and, getting that message from someone else. If you, example, come home and you complain about, oh, my teacher's a real whatever, and someone who's been through a genocide looks at you and say your teacher is a whatever. That's a real big problem, and they don't say that, but you just see it and sense it in their energy. It makes sense logically, but you're going to feel like, yeah, but I had a hard day, and you were only 6 or you were only 10. And to you, you did have a hard day. Now, sure, things could be harder, but you don't know that at 10, and so you're taking in that, okay, not only did I have a bad day, boy, there's something really wrong here, with the way I start shaming myself for having a bad day. Sometimes we internalize and it becomes more sadness with less of an ability to control it. So even though we grow up with an understanding that, no, my parents want me to feel joy because of what they've been through, it's harder because we have so much sadness built up in layers that we feel, not only guilt about feeling joy, but so much sadness to overcome that's not even ours.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah.
So now let's talk about how can someone be, their true self? How can you get to that point where you are really you and not, all those personalities and ancestors, and how can you get rid of all those things from the past that are not yours and heal those wounds and really be you? How would you do that? How would you describe that in your practice?
Well, what I would first tell people is we need to go back and we need to find out where all of these masks came from, how they were developed, and what purpose they serve, what function they serve when they serve them. Obviously, if I have to, say, do a podcast or give a speech, I have to bring forth a certain part of myself in order to concentrate to be able to do it. So that makes sense. I mean, in the here and now, this is what I have to bring forth. But what we look at is parts of self, aspects of self that have come to be and become rather automatic, and where they came from, what their origin is, why we developed them. Why we started doing what we started doing in order to survive, in order to get through, in order to have the best results, and started to feel and really believe that that was the best way, and sometimes the only way to get through what we had to get through. How it became what it became, how we invited those parts of self into being. And when we look at the origin, we'll see usually there was an emotion involved. There was a state of being involved that was emotional, where we felt, say, scared. And in order to get through the situation, we said, okay, I'm going to have to pretend I'm brave here, because if I pretend I'm scared, things can get worse. We often use the idea of abuse. If somebody's being struck, showing fear could get you struck again, or telling someone to stop could have them get even angrier at you. So you shut down, or you do whatever you do. You bring in a part of yourself that helps you to get through it. And that part becomes a habit. It becomes habitual because it was good for survival. And it was good to get certain results under certain emotional circumstances. So I asked people to look at the initial emotion that they felt when they first asked themselves to become something else to get through it. It made sense then. It worked then. It was adaptable then. That's what you had to do to get through the day or the moment at that time. But now as an adult, you don't necessarily have to do that automatically anymore. You can choose to if you want to, but you don't have to do what you did when you were 5 or when you were 10 in order to get through the day, in order to survive. You can be more mindful and choose, who do I want to be in this moment? So I begin with that process with people. Yeah.
Cool. So what I would do is, I agree with all the stuff you said, by the way, and I would add to it that a lot of times, from the past, we carry a lot of images and memories and things that have made us who we are today, and they sort of push us to the future. So, the past that we have and the things that we've been push us to continue to be that in the future. So, an example, today you are an accountant and you've, studied accounting your whole life and you've been working at an accounting firm. Chances of you being an accountant tomorrow are very high because you've already been doing that for so long, right? But that is just an image that we've created, and because we've been doing it for so long, we feel like we are this thing, this accounting thing, and yet if we want to get rid of it, or not get rid of it, but to really be present, and to leave the past, we have to focus on the present and to really see who we are today. Because we may have been doing accounting our entire lives, but that doesn't mean we're numbers. We could still be human beings and have, certain qualities in the present. And, maybe today we decide that we want to be something else. Then, if we focus on the present, we can change our present and be something else if that's what we want. Or if we want to continue to be accountants, then, to really be in the present present would mean to refresh our practice and to be more alive in the present and to really enjoy that more. Also, talking about what we were saying earlier, what if you've realized in the present that you're an accountant because your parents wanted you to be an accountant, but you really didn't want that. You wanted to be an artist, and in truth, you love painting or taking photographs or something that's very different than what you were raised with. And so realizing that can be very painful, but at the same time can be liberating, right?
Totally.
And so to be able to just drop the past and focus on what we have now in the present, that goes with relationships. If you've been in a relationship for a long time, for many years with someone, you built up a history with that person. But if you can just get rid of that history and just focus on the person you have in front of you, you may be able to fall in love with them again. You may be able to just focus on what you have in the present, and maybe you realize you don't love that person anymore, and maybe it's time to move on. I don't know. There's so many different things that could happen, but if we're in the present, it's a lot easier to change our lives, to be more alive, and to find who we are in the present now. And so focusing on what we have now and really, dropping the past, I think, doing mindfulness exercises, meditation, in the now, then I think we can do a lot more. And yes, I agree that observing the past sometimes is very important to see where things came from and why do we think the way we think. But to me, I found that the fastest way to just make a change is to focus on the now, but I don't know what you think about that.
No, I agree and understand what you're saying, that looking at the past, if we start to look at what the origins of things were, we can start to heal it to a certain degree and nurture it to a certain degree so that it doesn't control us anymore. We sort of become more integrated. So
right.
It allows us to be in the here and now, because a lot of our here and now is taken up with energies trying to avoid the past or fix it in some way, right? So you said something earlier I wanted to reiterate. Hey, if you've been in a 20-year relationship, we're not giving you a license to bail. We're just simply saying, take a look at your partner, and if you could be with old feelings and helped start to deal with and heal and nurture old feelings, you'll not need your partner to either fulfill what was missing in those feelings or, or go to somebody else to try to avoid feelings that you're starting to have. You could be with those feelings from the past, so you could be in the here and now. It's sort of the dots that I'm connecting. I'm saying, if you could be with feelings that you had in the past, that originated in the past, then you could be in the here and now with a lot more self-mastery and a lot more peace, because you're not trying to fix them, you're not trying to avoid them, you're not trying to look for another partner or another job just to satisfy them. And at the same time, like you said, you want to look back and say, what feelings did I have growing up that led me to believe that I had to become an accountant or I had to do what my parents wanted me to do, because I felt a lot of fear that they wouldn't love me. And if you could be with that fear, that sense of fear, which probably isn't true, but if you could be with that sense of fear that they wouldn't love you, and you could, heal yourself, heal your own fear in a way, then you could say to yourself, well, I'm still going to choose to be an artist now. And even if I do lose their love, I can soothe myself. I can be with that wound, so to speak. So it gives you kind of like a mastery in the here and now, if that makes any sense. As opposed to being the mask of the accountant. And there's nothing wrong with being an accountant. I mean, I have one,
No, of course, no.
I need one.
Yeah.
Badly.
Yeah.
So,
that was just an example, by the way, but yeah.
I know.
And I chose accountant because I myself have done bookkeeping in the past, and I know a lot of accountants, and sometimes accounting can be very boring, but some of these people, they love what they do, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if you really love what you do, even if it's math and numbers and all that stuff, it's okay.
Yeah.
As long as it's you that's doing it because you want to do it and nobody else made you do it, and that you're not doing it just for the money, because that's another thing a lot of people do is they do things just because they're going to make good money. But it's not just about the money. It's also about being you, and if you're you and you love what you do, I think that's the best thing you can do in life. Don't you think?
I do, because it's funny you bring up money, because that's another value that's a very predominant one along the spectrum growing up in a family of origin. What money means, the relationship to money, to wealth, the accumulated wealth, to status. Very big thing. You got to ask yourself, do I have the same values, or was I just raised with those values? And that's a big one. That's a huge one. So, having the freedom around doing what you love. But I also tell people that, and I believe this to be true, if you do love what you do, and you want to be successful, that is truly your value, the passion for what you do sort of generates the success.
Right.
People are drawn to you. If you're being in the here and now, if you're being mindful and passionate about what you do, people are drawn to you inside of what you do. It's almost like you don't have to have the best business cards in the world, because you are your best business card. If you really are passionate and grounded with what you do, people are just gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
A lot more so than having to be the best marketer. I mean, marketing helps, but you are your best market tool. To be
totally
honest.
Yeah, no, and your actions speak louder than words. So if you do what you love and you show it, it shows. I think it shows in your work. If you do good work, no matter what you do, it's going to come from love. And I think love is and passion is really important in life. And you really, when you die, you're not going to take anything. You're not going to take your money. You're not going to take all the possessions and material things you come up with. So what you do take is the experiences and the happiness you created and the things you learned in this life. So in order to learn and to do those things, you do need to be passionate about things and love things.
Absolutely, because you don't take anything with you, but what you leave behind you can affect and influence and impact the world in so many ways.
Yeah.
The smallest impact that you have on one person can have such a profound influence, you won't even know that it has that influence later on. It may or may not even be directly connected, but you could have a tremendous positive impact. Of course, you could have a negative one too, but you can have a very positive impact on someone, and it trickles, and it can be huge. You don't really understand sometimes. I don't. If you drop a dime in the pond, or a pebble in the pond, with a ripple effect that it can actually create. So what you are leaving behind is something worth a lot more than what you've accumulated. That's for sure.
Yes. Well, I love all those things. So thank you so much, for your time, and that was a really good thing to end it with. Any last words before we finish?
No, just be in your here and now. Just allow yourself to be in the here and now, and ask yourself, what is that feeling I'm feeling? And
Love that. Thank you so much. And please continue to send us your comments, questions, anything you want. You have all our information here at the description. And remember, we have all the social media. You can go on and send us messages there. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. And really thank you for your time. And we'll see you next week. Okay. And have a nice week.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
All right.
This podcast is brought to you by MindFit. Please help us to share this podcast with your friends and family to grow this community. And if you'd like to donate to this podcast, or if you'd like to share your comments, questions, or concerns, send them to mindfitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call us directly at 714-328-4661.